Oh, yes, ladies and gentlemen, welcome back. Welcome back to the November 11th, 2016 edition of The Story Behind Your Story. I'm your host, Dr. A. True. Yes, indeed, a big shout out tonight to all veterans who may be tuning in. It is Veterans Day, and I salute you, ladies and gentlemen. I do. I salute you for the services you have rendered and are yet to render, but again, I don't agree perhaps with wars of conquest and aggression that's not necessary, but I salute the veterans of yesteryear, the old soldiers of World War II. My father was severely wounded in Korea, lost a limb, just about lost his life, and unfortunately contracted hepatitis C, which eventually killed him from liver cancer. So when I talk about veterans, I'm talking about, again, men and women who just have been put in harm's way and do the best they can for their country. I salute you, folks. It's a great day. It's a sad day, however, when our commander in chief and the powers that be and the POTUS office sends you in harm's way for wrong-headed wars of conquest. America is in trouble, as I've said so many times over the years on this radio show. America is in trouble because America has ceased to be honest. America has ceased to be good. As de Tocqueville said so many years ago, America is great only because America is indeed good. And by good, I mean, folks, the standard of living by which goodness is judged is simply found in the New Testament of the Holy Bible. You throw that away, you throw away the Bible, you call it outdated, you call it hate speech and whatever else you hear today in the streets of protest following Tuesday's election. You throw that away, you throw away goodness. I've seen protest signs across America that say we must welcome diversity. Everybody's welcome here. All are welcome. All religions, including paganism, including, but not limited to, Satanism, according to the Hollywood elite, as we laid out last month in our shows. Folks, that's the sign and the gateways to hell itself. The angel from hell, the prince of the power of the air, he wants everybody to be included. He wants everybody. He wants it all. There is no exclusion for those who are good and those who are honest and those who are trustworthy. He really wants them, but you see, so does the Savior and the Creator of this world. He wants you. He calls those to him. And that's the reality, folks. I'm telling you, the topic tonight, I can't be silent on this. I really can't. I watched the events unfold on Tuesday night with a big laugh because, two things happened in my research and my investigation. This is what I want to discuss tonight. The topic of tonight's show is simply Vote Scam 2016. Vote Scam 2016. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm gonna be very hard hitting tonight. I'm gonna tell it like it is. I want you to follow through as best you can, and then, if you really care about America being great again, America being good again, this absolute hypocrisy, this absolute scam, this fraud has to stop. The philosopher Goethe, the German philosopher Goethe, might have said it best when he said, no man is more hopelessly enslaved than he or she who falsely believes that they are free. Think about that. Think about that deeply. No man, or in this case women, no man or woman, no person is more hopelessly enslaved than he or she who falsely believes that they are free. Now, freedom, you see, takes many forms. The The key part of a republic of the people, by the people, and for the people is that we have free elections. We have honest elections. We have open elections. I'm here to tell you, folks, the system is rigged. Absolutely rigged. Can I prove this? Absolutely. Get me in front of a grand jury. Get me in front of an. I want to talk to the talking heads of the 5 major networks. I'm telling you, folks, you look hard at the evidence I'm going to present tonight, and any reasonable person, any reasonable juror, any reasonable member of a grand jury cannot say with good conscience this is bogus. It's absolutely factual, folks. Absolutely factual. We have President-elect Donald Trump shocking the world. But did he really? Was the fix in from the beginning? I submit to you, yes, indeed, the fix was in from the beginning. When you hear Trump parroting the mantra, oh, these elections are rigged. Yeah, of course we know what happened at the Democratic National Convention. Bernie Sanders got ripped. It was rigged. We know that. It's documented. But we the people, and especially the Democrats, seem to have a real short memory of things, of facts. That's a sad situation. So when we hear Donald Trump saying and getting all kinds of mocking comments from late night talk show hosts and talking heads on MSNBC and CNN and Fox, etc., etc., it's rigged. It's rigged. It's rigged. Yeah, folks, it is. And so the major news media hears that type of rhetoric and they'll come up and say that's the most dangerous line of thinking ever because we can't think that way. We've got to believe that it's honest. And so we don't really look at the evidence, do we? And the key thing is to make a rigged election actually work, it has to be believable. You see, California is, as we're speaking, very seriously considering seceding from the Union. Now, I kid you not, folks, there's absolute strong momentum in this Democrat blue state. They don't want to be a part of a country that's governed by Donald Trump. So they're actually looking at a 2018 voter referendum to secede from the Union, to have their own nation of California. I don't know what they would call it. But think about this, folks. Why? You see, could the riggers of the election, could anybody believe actually that Trump could closely, narrowly win in California? Of course not. The vast majority of votes were tallied correctly for Hillary. What about the District of Criminals, DNC? Do you see those on election night? 96% of the vote going to Hillary, 3.5%, 4% to Donald Trump. You see, there is such a vast difference. You see, I am not, you listen to my shows of October, I am absolutely not a Hillary Rodham Clinton fan. Of course not. She is highly corrupt and highly evil and treasonous. There's no doubt about that. Now, the question becomes, are these, there's one of two scenarios here I want you to think about as we go to, I'm going to play a clip that will set the stage for all of this, folks. And there's one of two scenarios that I see happening. A, either Donald Trump was ahead all the way, had the election well handled, and the pollsters were, these black box pollsters were trying to swing the election from Trump to Hillary. And by doing so, showing all these election polls, the election day polls, the showing that Hillary was indeed the winner, exit polling so-called. That's one scenario. The second scenario is that the pollsters were right, that the groundswell of support as shown California, Oregon, Washington, these were actually the sentiment across the country. And the rigging was done not by Hillary, but by Donald Trump. Think about this, folks. To do the rigging, you have to employ the gatekeepers that can make it happen. To employ those people, you need many, many millions of dollars that's outside of traceable election donations. Does Hillary Rodham and Bill Clinton have that type of money? While their Trump Foundation has millions and millions in it, it pales in comparison to Donald Trump. You see, there's a reason why Donald Trump doesn't show his tax returns. First of all, of course, he's not required to by law. If he wants to be transparent, by all means, do what Mitt Romney did, show your tax returns. But see, here's the problem. It's just like the Mormon Church Incorporated. The Mormon Church will never share their tax returns and never share their financial statements. They'll never show their so-called CAFR, the Consolidated Annual Financial Report, as required by all nonprofit organizations, not the least of which are churches. Why won't the Mormon Church show its financial balance sheets? Because you see, the wise people that know how to read balance sheets will put two and two together and know who really controls the Mormon Church behind the scenes. That's the reality. And I submit that it's the same thing with Donald Trump. They don't want to see how much money is brought in and how beholden he is to Rothschild/Rockefeller big banks in the city of London and the city of New York. Let's face it, folks, Donald Trump is a made man. He's made wealthy because of his incredible connections to very, very powerful Rothschild banking interests. Now, that's fact. You got the Crown Jewish family, the Crown family of Chicago, who's very much socialist, so-called progressive, the insurance company Progressive, yeah. It's exactly this. The founder of the Progressive Insurance Company is a flat-out Jewish communist, okay? It's a reality. Check into it. Check it out. Now, you have the Crown family, which backs the Democrats, the agenda of the liberals/progressives, and on the other side of the counterfeit coin, you have the capitalist, Zionist, neocon Jews, the Koch brothers, others that are very much tied into that. And the corrupt thing is the city of London, the House of Rothschild, controls ultimately both sides of that counterfeit coin. Heads, you see, heads, you win, tails, I lose. And that's the American public. There is no winner. Anybody that's elected, the loser is the American people, and not one person in 10 can ever see through it and figure it out. Not one person in 100. Nay, one person in 1,000, I submit. But I'm going to help you with that tonight, folks. I'll give you the information. Let's start out and see the side of Donald Trump that is carefully hidden by the mainstream media, shall we? Let's look and see what his agenda ultimately, and whether the conservative patriots, so-called, of America have been bamboozled by this, who I call him a charlatan. That's what I think he is. I think he's a grand player on a big stage. But you made the judge of that, folks. Okay, we'll just ask it's best to cue this up, folks, what it is. This is 25 minutes of Donald Trump speaking, addressing the American Israeli Political Action Committee, the AIPAC, the largest single lobbying group in all of Washington District of Criminals. It's the most powerful. You do not get elected without the stamp of approval of AIPAC, period. Listen and hear for yourself. Keep in mind as you hear this 25 minutes that at least half of the AIPAC crowd came loaded with signs, protest signs to stand and do a walkout in the first 10 minutes of Trump's speech, walk out on him and have an absolute protest to disrupt him completely. But instead, you listen to what happened. He received a rousing standing ovation. Here it is. Donald Trump speaking to AIPAC on the primary, just after the primary elections. He's now the candidate for the Republican GOP. Listen in.
Good evening. Thank you very much. I speak to you today as a lifelong supporter and true friend of Israel. I'm a newcomer to politics, but not to backing the Jewish state. In 2001, weeks after the attacks on New York City and on Washington, and frankly, the attacks on all of us, attacks that they were perpetrated by the Islamic fundamentalists, Mayor Rudy Giuliani visited Israel to show solidarity with terror victims. I sent my plane because I backed the mission for Israel 100%. In spring of 2004, at the height of the violence in the Gaza Strip, I was the Grand Marshal of the 40th Salute to Israel Parade, the largest single gathering in support of the Jewish state. It was a very dangerous time for Israel and, frankly, for anyone supporting Israel. Many people turned down this honor. I did not. I took the risk, and I'm glad I did. But I didn't come here tonight to pander to you about Israel. That's what politicians do. All talk, no action, believe me. I came here to speak to you about where I stand on the future of American relations with our strategic ally, our unbreakable friendship, and our cultural brother, the only democracy in the Middle East, the State of Israel. Thank you. My number one priority is to dismantle the disastrous deal with Iran. Thank you. Thank you. I have been in business a long time. I know deal making. And let me tell you, this deal is catastrophic for America, for Israel, and for the whole of the Middle East. The problem here is fundamental. We've rewarded the world's leading state sponsor of terror with $150 billion, and we received absolutely nothing in return. I've studied this issue in great detail, I would say actually greater by far than anybody else. Believe me. Oh, believe me. And it's a bad deal. The biggest concern with the deal is not necessarily that Iran is going to violate it, because already, as you know, it has. The bigger problem is that they can keep the terms and still get the bomb by simply running out the clock. And of course, they'll keep the billions and billions of dollars that we so stupidly and foolishly gave them. The deal doesn't even require Iran to dismantle its military nuclear capability. Yes, it places limits on its military nuclear program for only a certain number of years. But when those restrictions expire, Iran will have an industrial-sized military nuclear capability ready to go and with zero provision for delay, no matter how bad Iran's behavior is. Terrible, terrible situation that we are all placed in, and especially Israel. When I'm president, I will adopt a strategy that focuses on three things when it comes to Iran. First, we will stand up to Iran's aggressive push to destabilize and dominate the region. Iran is a very big problem and will continue to be. But if I'm not elected president, I know how to deal with trouble. And believe me, that's why I'm going to be elected president, folks. And we are leading in every poll. Remember that, please. Iran is a problem in Iraq, a problem in Syria, a problem in Lebanon, a problem in Yemen, and will be a very, very major problem for Saudi Arabia. Literally every day, Iran provides more and better weapons to support their puppet states. Hezbollah, Lebanon, received, and I'll tell you what, it has received sophisticated anti-ship weapons, anti-aircraft weapons, and GPS systems and rockets like very few people anywhere in the world, and certainly very few countries have. Now they're in Syria trying to establish another front against Israel.
Okay, there's a commercial advertising.
Establish another front against Israel from the Syrian side of the Golan Heights. In Gaza, Iran is supporting Hamas and Islamic Jihad. And in the West Bank, they're openly offering Palestinians $7,000 per terror attack and $30,000 for every Palestinian terrorist home that's been destroyed. A deplorable, deplorable situation. Iran is financing military forces throughout the Middle East, and it's absolutely incredible that we handed them over $150 billion to do even more toward the many horrible acts of terror. Secondly, we will totally dismantle Iran's global terror network, which is big and powerful, but not powerful like us. Iran has seeded terror groups all over the world. During the last 5 years, Iran has perpetuated terror attacks in 25 different countries on 5 continents. They've got terror cells everywhere, including in the Western Hemisphere, very close to home. Iran is the biggest sponsor of terrorism around the world, and we will work to dismantle that reach. Believe me, believe me. Third, at the very least, we must enforce the terms of the previous deal to hold Iran totally accountable, and we will enforce it like you've never seen a contract enforced before, folks. Believe me. Iran has already, since the deal is in place, test-fired ballistic missiles 3 times. Those ballistic missiles, with a range of 1,250 miles, were designed to intimidate not only Israel, which is only 600 miles away, but also intended to frighten Europe and someday maybe hit even the United States. And we're not going to let that happen. We're not letting it happen, and we're not letting it happen to Israel, believe me. Thank you. Do you want to hear something really shocking? As many of the great people in this room know, painted on those missiles in both Hebrew and Farsi were the words, "Israel must be wiped off the face of the earth." You can forget that. What kind of demented minds write that in Hebrew? And here's another. You talk about twisted. Here's another twisted part. Testing these missiles does not even violate the horrible deal that we've made. The deal is silent on test missiles. But those tests do violate the United Nations Security Council resolutions. The problem is no one has done anything about it. We will, I promise we will. Thank you. Which brings me to my next point, the utter weakness and incompetence of the United Nations. The United Nations is not a friend of democracy. It's not a friend to freedom. It's not a friend even to the United States of America, where, as you know, it has its home. And it surely is not a friend to Israel. With President Obama in his final year, yay. He may be the worst thing to ever happen to Israel, believe me. Believe me. And you know it, and you know it better than anybody. So with the president in his final year, discussions have been swirling about an attempt to bring a Security Council resolution on terms of an eventual agreement between Israel and Palestine. Let me be clear. An agreement imposed by the United Nations would be a total and complete disaster. The United States must oppose this resolution and use the power of our veto, which I will use as president 100%. When people ask why, it's because that's not how you make a deal. Deals are made when parties come together. They come to a table and they negotiate. Each side must give up something. It's values. I mean, we have to do something where there's value in exchange for something that it requires. That's what a deal is. A deal is really something that when we impose it on Israel and Palestine, we bring together a group of people that come up with something that's not going to happen with the United Nations. It will only further, very importantly, it will only further delegitimize Israel. It will be a catastrophe. Legitimize Israel. It will be a catastrophe and a disaster for Israel. It's not going to happen, folks. And further, it would reward Palestinian terrorism because every day they're stabbing Israelis and even Americans. Just last week, American Taylor Allen Force, a West Point grad, phenomenal young person who served in Iraq and Afghanistan, was murdered in the street by a knife-wielding Palestinian. You don't reward behavior like that. You cannot do it. There's only one way you treat that kind of behavior. You have to confront it. So it's not up to the United Nations to really go with a solution. It's really the parties that must negotiate a resolution themselves. They have no choice. They have to do it themselves, or it will never hold up anyway. The United States can be useful as a facilitator of negotiations, but no one should be telling Israel that it must be, and really that it must abide by some agreement made by others thousands of miles away that don't even really know what's happening to Israel, to anything in the area. It's so preposterous. We're not going to let that happen. When I'm president, believe me, I will veto any attempt by the UN to impose its will on the Jewish state. It will be vetoed 100%. You see, I know about deal making. That's what I do. I wrote The Art of the Deal. One of the best-selling all-time, and I mean seriously, I'm saying one of because I'll be criticized as if I say the, so I'm going to be very diplomatic. One of, I'll be criticized. I think it is number one, but why take a chance? One of the all-time best-selling books about deals and deal-making. To make a great deal, you need two willing participants. We know Israel is willing to deal. Israel has been trying. That's right. Israel has been trying to sit down at the negotiating table without preconditions for years. You had Camp David in 2000, where Prime Minister Barak made an incredible offer, maybe even too generous. Arafat rejected it. In 2008, Prime Minister Olmert made an equally generous offer. The Palestinian Authority rejected it also. Then John Kerry tried to come up with a framework, and Abbas didn't even respond, not even to the Secretary of State of the United States of America. They didn't even respond. When I become president, the days of treating Israel like a second-class citizen will end on day one. Thank you. And when I say something, I mean it. I mean it. I will meet with Prime Minister Netanyahu immediately. I have known him for many years and will be able to work closely together to help bring stability and peace to Israel and to the entire region. Meanwhile, every single day, you have rampant incitement and children being taught to hate Israel and to hate the Jews. It has to stop. When you live in a society where the firefighters are the heroes, little kids want to be firefighters. When you live in a society where athletes and movie stars are the heroes, little kids want to be athletes and movie stars. In Palestinian society, the heroes are those who murder Jews. We can't let this continue. We can't let this happen any longer. You cannot achieve peace if terrorists are treated as martyrs. Glorifying terrorists is a tremendous barrier to peace. It is a horrible, horrible way to think. It's a barrier that can't be broken. That will end, and it'll end soon, believe me. In Palestinian textbooks and mosques, you've got a culture of hatred that has been fermenting there for years. And if we want to achieve peace, they've got to go out and they've got to start this educational process. They have to end education of hatred. They have to end it, and now. There is no moral equivalency. Israel does not name public squares after terrorists. Israel does not pay its children to stab random Palestinians. You see, what President Obama gets wrong about deal-making is that he constantly applies pressure to our friends and rewards our enemies. And you see that happening all the time. That pattern practiced by the president and his administration, including former Secretary of State Hillary Clinton, who is a total disaster, by the way.
Let's be honest. You don't see Grandma.
By the way. She and President Obama have treated Israel very, very badly. But it's repeated itself over and over again and has done nothing to embolden those who hate America. We saw that with releasing the $150 billion to Iran in the hope that they would magically join the world community. It didn't happen. President Obama thinks that applying pressure to Israel will force the issue, but it's precisely the opposite that happens. Already, half of the population of Palestine has been taken over by the Palestinian ISIS and Hamas, and the other half refuses to confront the first half, so it's a very difficult situation that's never going to get solved unless you have great leadership right here in the United States. We'll get it solved one way or the other. We will get it solved. But when the United States stands with Israel, the chances of peace really rise, and rises exponentially. That's what will happen when Donald Trump is president of the United States. We will move the American embassy to the eternal capital of the Jewish people, Jerusalem. And we will send a clear signal that there is no daylight between America and our most reliable ally, the State of Israel. The Palestinians must come to the table knowing that the bond between the United States and Israel is absolutely, totally unbreakable. They must come to the table willing and able to stop the terror being committed on a daily basis against Israel. They must do that. And they must come to the table willing to accept that Israel is a Jewish state and it will forever exist as a Jewish state. I love the people in this room. I love Israel. I love Israel. I've been with Israel so long in terms of I've received some of my greatest honors from Israel. My father before me, incredible. My daughter Ivanka is about to have a beautiful Jewish baby. In fact, it could be happening right now, which would be very nice as far as I'm concerned. So I want to thank you very much. This has been a truly great honor. Thank you, everybody. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Okay, you heard it from his own lips, ladies and gentlemen. That's the real, honest to goodness agenda of Donald Trump. He loves those people. He loves everything about them. And you didn't hear any boos. You didn't hear any protests. Of course not. Those protest signs, and there were thousands of them printed up ready to go rock and roll, and on a big protest of them, they were torn up. They were thrown away. He got standing ovations. You heard the thunderous, almost deafening applause. Here's the problem. Israel is a foreign nation. Israel's Six-Day War, during the Six-Day War in 1967, these wonderful people, Mr. Trump, attacked a U.S. ship called the USS Liberty. Sir, today's Labor Day. Today is Veterans Day. There are Americans killed in a most dastardly attack. We were on the very precipice, ladies and gentlemen. That day when the USS Liberty was attacked, we were on the very precipice of nuclear war. We've never been so close. This is the untold story behind the story of the USS Liberty. Yes, but it takes the British broadcasting company, the BBC, to do a documentary special on the USS Liberty because American interests will never touch it. I've interviewed on this very radio show survivors of the USS Liberty, and they know exactly what went on. They were there. They watched their crew members, their friends, their companions strafe to death in the water, in lifeboats. They saw the faces of the Israeli pilots as they shot them dead. They saw and witnessed it, and there was no mistake. They knew who they were strafing. Don't tell me that Israel is our friend, Mr. Trump. Are you that stupid? Are you that ignorant? Or are you that corrupt? It's got to be one of those two. I'm tired of this. It's a foreign nation that is not our friend. September 11th, all of the evidence points to Israel doing it. All of it. From Dov Zakheim, the controller of the Pentagon, and $2.3 trillion missing. I don't know about you, ladies and gentlemen. I've had enough of this chicanery, these lies. I've had enough of it. I cannot send back and just let these imposters, because that's who they are. The book of Revelation in the Bible is very clear, chapters 2 and chapter 3. The modern day end times is all predicated on the machinations of those Jews who say they are Jews but are not, but are of the synagogue of Satan. Yes, indeed, ladies and gentlemen, the mafia, the Jewish mafia, have killed millions and millions of Christians, white Christians. That's the reality. The Bolshevik Jews, you read the book by Solzhenitsyn on the Gulag Archipelago. You read and understand those who went through it, the destruction you see of the white Christians under Tsar Nicholas and the Bolshevik uprising, the millions of people starved to death and killed. Who is the most egregious terrorist group in this world? Listen up. Listen to what the Palestinians are saying, because they're absolutely right. The Palestinian people have more true Israel blood in them, according to geneticists, a Jewish geneticist, Dr. El Hayek, have 5 times more Jewish blood. I mean, ancient Hebrew blood. Jewish is a religion, not a bloodline. They're interlopers. They're power-mad, drunken synagogue of Satan. Their father is the father of lies, Satan himself. That's who they honor. Now, you heard Donald Trump say outright lies about the Palestinian people. I know. I've been to Palestine, folks. I've been on the West Bank. I've sat down and talked with the Palestinian people. They're in abject poverty, ladies and gentlemen. How would you like it if you've lived on a land? See, the Palestinian people are very family oriented, very much so. When grandma and grandpa get older, they live together in families. They stack families one on top of another. The family is very much a part of their life. When the son marries, the daughter comes and lives with the family. That's what they do. They have for centuries, for generations, for thousands of years. That is their land. I've talked to these people. How would you like it, folks, if you have a way of life, a custom way of life that you've enjoyed for 2,000 years? It's your land. You've always lived there. Your families have lived there forever. And suddenly, United Nations blue helmeted troops come in with bulldozers and tell you to get off of the land that it now belongs to a group of people who have no historical or ethical right to the land whatsoever. That is the Ashkenazim, the Khazars of Eastern Europe. They don't belong there. Dr. El Hayek has proved that with his genetic research. Jews like Arthur Kessler in his book, The 13th Tribe, has documented this. They're usurpers. They are satanic imposters. But nevertheless, they're forced out, and more lands are annexed, and they're forced out even more, so they have to crowd into tent cities. I've been there. I've been on the West Bank. I've seen it happen. I saw, in fact, the place where Rachel Corrie took a stand. Yeah, a conservative, blonde-haired, blue-eyed American stood up to the Israeli bulldozers who never stopped. They bulldozed her over, ladies and gentlemen. They killed her. Never heard of Rachel Corrie? Check it out. Donald Trump, you are an imposter and a fraud. And you stole this election. Now, we've never really had a free election since at least following the years of Kennedy. I'm here to document this, folks. We have no free elections. They've all been controlled. The powers that be in this case are the Jewish mafia, folks. That's who controls. That's who has been the gatekeepers of the election since John F. Kennedy. That's a reality. I can prove it. I can prove it. We're going to get into that in the second hour. I'm going to document this in depth. I'm going to tell you who are the gatekeepers. I'm going to give names. I'm going to point fingers. And one thing is very much in common. One thing is very much in common here, folks. One thing is very common here. Behind the curtains, the puppet masters are Bolshevik, communist, Jewish mafia. Can you handle the truth, ladies and gentlemen? Will it open your eyes? Will it force enough people to say enough? You see, the mainstream media will never, ever even mention this. Because you see, that's the so-called man behind the curtain. That's the Wizard of Oz, the great and powerful Oz. The mainstream media pay no attention to those crazy conspiracy theorists like True Oz. He's nuts. Pay no attention to that monkey behind the curtain. Do you want to know what the machine is all about? Do you want to know what the gears that drive this? Why the pendulum will swing from left to right, from Clinton to Bush to back to Obama, and now to the most rabid Zionist of them all, this Jew-loving miscreant, Donald Trump. Make no mistake how he made his billions. Make no mistake why he does not release his tax returns. Make no mistake, because then he'll be exposed as to who really controls this man. You thought George W. Bush was a Zionist and a warmonger. Well, welcome the worst of the bunch, and that's Donald Trump. I'm here to tell you, you heard it on this show. You heard it from his own mouth, ladies and gentlemen. The first thing he said in his press conference Wednesday to the combined media, when they asked him what his first official act would be as president after taking the oath of office on January 20th, do you know what he said? Was it to arrest Hillary, to indict her? Was it to appoint a special prosecutor? Was it to start building a wall to keep immigrants coming out of things? All the rhetoric he used to flame up the people, right? No, none of that. He said, I will make good on my most important promise. My first official act will be to move the U.S. Embassy from Tel Aviv to the rightful capital of Israel, Jerusalem. Now, folks, you have to understand the climate of Jerusalem. You have to know the history. Jerusalem is basically a divided city, and it's, on the Mount of the Temple Mount of ancient Israel. Now there is this Dome of the Rock, the most holy site, second most holy site behind Mecca, actually, in all of the Islamic world. Eastern Jerusalem has been ceded by international decree to Jordan and the Islamic nation. When I was there, it's just stunning. It was a daily occurrence. You have groups of Jews going on to the eastern side of Jerusalem on the sector that's not owned by Israel, but by the Islamic faithful. The Islamic faithful never go in on the Wailing Wall and shout down the rabbis. I was there for 4 days. Every single day, very loud-mouthed, screaming Jews would go on the east side and shout down the calls to prayer and make general ruckus, praying for the abandonment of Islam to tear down the Dome of the Rock. Now, folks, you got to understand who was fomenting that. It wasn't the Jews that were it wasn't the Palestinians that was causing the terror and the disruptions. The reality is, if the United States forces this hand and recognizes Jerusalem as the capital of Israel, there will be jihad. You want to come on, Mr. Trump, you're a deal maker. What are you giving up? No, you're just declaring what it will be. What have you paid? Who has bought this election for you, sir? The reality is, ladies and gentlemen, what scares me, I'm not afraid, really. I'm not scared. What concerns me more, I should say, is the war that's going to come out of this man's actions, all because of Israel. We're going to take a break, folks. We're going to come back with Stay tuned. This is the story behind the story. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the second hour of the story behind the story. I'm your host, Dr. A. Truott, and yeah, it's critically important to know the actual agenda of Donald Trump. You never hear him discussing these things in public. Why? Because you see, the patriots of this country, the so-called conservatives, would be outraged with it. How dare he make these declarations so blatantly, to blindly do whatever Israel demands of him? Now, let's get some history back. Let me just be very blunt and very, very clear. Let's look at the history of Israel, and specifically that of the holy city itself, Jerusalem. From the year 1517 until the end of the First World War, aka the Great War, Jerusalem was part of what's known as the Ottoman Empire. Now, about the time of the U.S. Civil War in the 1860s, there was a mass immigration of religious Eastern European Jews. Really have no bloodline connections whatsoever. They just have a religion. They need a place to go and to basically call themselves home. They were basically wanderers. The Pale of Settlement, you see, during the 1860s, under the Tsar of Russia, you see there was a lot of exodus out of the Pale of Settlement of Eastern Europe, the control of the Mother Russia. During the Civil War years, the Tsar sent emissaries of the secret police to Abraham Lincoln and explained who was in charge of the Union and the Confederate forces. The agents specifically were agents of Rothschild in France and agents of Rothschild in England for the sole purpose of destroying this fledgling republic. Abraham Lincoln was stunned by all this. What could you say? They were documents. So in this whole time, the discovery of the protocols of the wise men of Zion was discovered and found. These are part of the things that was given to Abraham Lincoln. Oh, of course, Dr. Ott, you know those are all forgeries. Those are all fraudulent forgeries. No, they are not. Heavens, no. Of course the Jews themselves are going to say these are fraudulent and make up some kind of story. The history is clear. This was in the 1860s. There was a plot to basically destroy the Tsar. It took him until 1917 to do it. And the Bolshevik Revolution was part of their agenda. It was very much concerned the white Christian families of the Tsarist Russia. Very much so. Very much so. So during this time of upheaval in Russia, the Jews left Russia, came and started to push their weight around in Jerusalem. That's a fact. By 1887, about 2.5 decades, the religious, again, not bloodline, religious Jews, because you follow the history that Arthur Kessler and others have documented so well. This was mass conversions by the Khazarian people. They are Gog and Magog. The book, The Matrix of Gog by Patrick explains all of this in great detail, who they are. They are not ancient Israel. They're not. Gog and Magog is out of the pagan. They're not covenant people of God, never have been. They're imposters. They are the synagogue of Satan. Now, the Great War, when it ended, guess what happened? Then we see Great Britain in control of Palestine and the Holy City. And there was so much conflict. You talk about terrorism, you talk about murders. It wasn't the Palestinian people. They might be reprising, but the murders were happening on the part of the Jewish people against the Palestinians. And I'm talking Jewish people as a religion, not as a bloodline. After World War I, in 1923, Great Britain issued what's called the Mandate of Palestine. The Allied powers of that time, which included, to a certain degree, the United States, but not so much. Mostly it was the United Kingdom. They recognized the totally unique spiritual and religious interests in Jerusalem. You see, there's three great monotheistic religions. There's Islam, there's Christianity, and there's Judaism. So the three great monotheistic religions, the Brits said, we have a sacred trust of civilization. And under international accord, the League of Nations at that time, they said that Jerusalem would be, quote, safeguarded in perpetuity and not by one religion. But the problem is the foment, again, who's the interlopers? The Jews were the interlopers, not the Palestinians. They've been there for literally 1,000 or more years. They own the property. They are there. They're living their lives there. The interlopers are the Jews. They have no business being there. They are not returning to Jerusalem because their forefathers never were there. That's a reality, folks. Titus and his Roman legion killed millions. They wiped out the Jerusalem Jews and the Jews in that country. They wiped them out under Titus. There were just a few rabbis that escaped into Europe, and there the religion became part of the Khazar, Eastern European Khazarian bloodlines. That's the history. So we have Adolf Hitler, and the secret papers of Hitler published the book in a book called Hitler's War. We have David Irving documenting that Adolf Hitler was all about supporting the Zionist ideal of having the Jews return to Israel. But that's a lie. Adolf Hitler was absolutely wrong in that. Adolf Hitler's top SS agents were all Jewish. They were Khazarian Jews like George Soros. Look at George Soros' history. George Soros, during World War II, as a young lad, went out and fingered other Jews. He was Jewish himself, Soros, and the family, but he fingered those Jews who were rapidly anti-Zionist. You see, it's those Jews that were rounded up under the skull and crossbones of the Gestapo and sent to concentration camps. And yes, many were liquidated. But they were the anti-Zionist crowd, the anti-Zionist rabbis who said, we're not going to be part of this. We don't have anything to do with Israel and Palestine. We just want to live our religion. That's it. We're religious. That's it. We have no ties to Israel, to Palestine. They had to be liquidated, and so they were. At the end of World War II, the stage was set. Palestine became the homeland for these Zionists, now funded by Rothschild interests, Lord Balfour, and other interests in England. The City of London made it possible, the House of Rothschild, and New York, Ashkenazim, the mafioso. See, the head of all organized crime in America are Jewish, ladies and gentlemen. They run the mob, and they do. And that's who formed this corrupt, illegitimate nation state called Israel. And that's the reality, folks. That's history. In May of 1948, this terrorist community called Jews in Palestine issued the most blatant declaration you could ever believe. The declaration of the establishment of the State of Israel. They had no business doing that. The Palestinians had the legal right to all that. This new state declaration was quickly recognized by Harry Truman, de facto in the United States. I recognize this state of Israel. Guess who the second nation to recognize Israel as legitimate? Would you like to guess in a million years who that was? The nation state of Iran, folks, the Shah of Iran, the puppet of America recognized it second. That's a fact. Then came Guatemala, Iceland, Nicaragua, Romania, and Uruguay. On 17th of May 17th, a very important numerical day, by the way, 5/17/1948. The Soviet Union, which are, again, the communist Bolshevik Jews that run the Soviet Union, recognized it de jure legally. I have a legal recognition. And of course, the entire communist bloc followed suit. Poland, Czechoslovakia, Yugoslavia, and South Africa. The official recognition of the United States didn't come after the first Israeli election on 31st of January of 1949. On May 11th of 1949, Israel became a member of the United Nations, so they became officially a nation state. Yet, what about Palestine? Say, what about Palestine? But here's the key. Every single state that officially recognized Israel as a nation made very clear they would not recognize Israel's sovereignty over Jerusalem. Because you see, it goes back to there's three religions that hold it to be very sacred to them: Christianity, Islam, and Judaism. You can't have one controlling it all. Of course, the most vocal were the Arab nations around it, the Islamic states. No, this isn't right. These interlopers don't belong here. They knew it. It wasn't a matter of of prejudice and hate. It's just a matter of no, they don't belong. These are Eastern Europeans that have no right to be here. They knew it. There's no need to have a nation state named Israel put in and to control them. So there was the war. Then there was the 1967 war, which I documented in the first hour, which Israel attacked the USS Liberty, clearly knowing it was a United States ship. But you see, it was intercepting communications. It was intercepting documentation that Israel fully planned to foment a nuclear attack against Egypt. Nukes. And if a nuclear bomb went off in Cairo, the Soviet Union was all set to bring. It was coming. International nuclear war was very real. Their bombers were scrambled, folks. It's a fact. Scary, scary brink of nuclear Armageddon. After the 1967 war, Israel then unilaterally now declared that Israel now owned East Jerusalem, and thus all of Jerusalem, because they already had control of West Jerusalem. And they enlarged its eastern boundaries going into the Gaza Strip, etc., basically doubling its size. This action was condemned by vote, by process of law in the United Nations Security Council and General Assembly, who described this annexation as a violation of the rights of the Palestinian people. Didn't stop Israel in 1980 from passing a law declaring that, quote, Jerusalem complete and unified is the capital of Israel, end quote. Look it up, folks. United Nations Resolution 478. Israel's law was officially by the United Nations declared null and void. There's been numerous resolutions since then by the UN General Assembly. Keep your hands off of Jerusalem. Again, folks, the reason being the General Assembly understands that to declare Jerusalem to be owned completely by these imposter Jews calling themselves Israel is tantamount to the middle finger being given to Allah, to Muhammad, there will be jihad. Talk about a firecracker. Today, you heard Donald Trump's declarations of how the United Nations is a joke and it's bogus, yada 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 yada. The reality is, folks, the United Nations today, 2016, considers East Jerusalem to simply be, and I quote, occupied Palestinian territory. So when Donald Trump says, well, these wonderful Israeli prime ministers tried to get Palestine to the bargaining table, there's no bargaining table if they're if they're illegally occupying eastern Jerusalem, which has been set aside by treaty. There's nothing to bargain about. You're illegally here. We have the law on our side. We have the rule of law. Just get the heck out of East Jerusalem, and we're fine. But see, Donald Trump doesn't say that. He doesn't tell you the truth about that. That's what makes me so mad about the man. He's a demagogue. He claims to know all there is to know about the situation over there. Well, he's obviously pandering to a select group. You see, the powerful Political Action Committee, AIPAC. And man, did he pander to them. Hillary's speech was almost booed. It was like, we have to recognize Palestinian law. And yeah, she was right in that, because it was right out of the UN directions. But it isn't what the AIPAC Zionist nutcases wanted to hear. That's the reality. And again, folks, I am not a Hillary Clinton fan. Absolutely not. Oh, my goodness. The United Nations has, to this day, declared Eastern Jerusalem to be occupied Palestinian territory. You know, when I was visiting there, indeed, the peacekeepers there that kind of try to keep these loudmouth, screaming, spitting, hate-filled Jews from going to the east side there on the Dome of the Rock side were United Nations blue-helmeted peacekeepers. The people fomenting the problems are not the Palestinians. Case in point, we went to the Gaza and Palestine to go visit the Tomb of the Patriarchs, which is in Palestinian controlled territory. It's Palestinian settlements, but everywhere you go, you see jeeps with machine guns and automatic weapon pillboxes of Israeli soldiers keeping the peace from these hateful Palestinians. We go to the Tomb of the Patriarchs, which is evenly divided, right down the middle. Half of the tomb of Abraham and Isaac and Jacob, half of the tomb is on Palestinian/Islamic control. The other half is a Jewish synagogue. It's split right down the middle. The day that we were there visiting was the 10th anniversary of a mass terrorist attack, not by the Palestinians on the Jews. No, automatic machine gun wielding Jew went into the Palestinian sector and the Palestinian side and shot up and killed a bunch of Palestinians. That's true. That was there. We walked in. We gave reverence to both sides. We took our shoes off, put the protective coats over, covering our heads. We went in and saw the Palestinian side, the Islamic side, and then we went in to view the synagogue side. The Palestinian side, we were greeted with bows and smiles, handshakes and hugs. You see very few Western tourists go on that side. Very few. We did. We were led by an archaeologist who knows the sides very well. But as we went and walked through the synagogue side, the hate, the baleful stares, the hissing that was given to us was so evident of their mindsets. We were looked upon as, how dare you come into this and see what we're doing? You don't belong here, get out. It was clear in their eyes. We were most definitely not welcome to be there, but on the Palestinian side, we were greeted with respect and embrace and smiles and handshakes and thank yous. Folks, I just observe. I'm just a JFO, just another freaking observer. But I witnessed what I witnessed. All right, I saw it. Let me tell you a little story about occupied Palestinian territory. There's one of the original sites of Abraham where Abraham set up and began his ministry there in the Promised Land. Abraham's first city, there was a all under excavation. It's in a Palestinian neighborhood. It's very poor, very, very poor. The standard of living, talk about third world country. They're living on rock. I mean, you talk about rocky rock, okay? Jeez. And these Palestinian kids are pretty good rock chuckers, man. They know how to chuck rocks. We were told, so we're right by a boys' school. The site is fenced off from a boys' school, and they said, don't make eye contact with these boys, especially the older boys, because they want, if you don't give them a dollar or this or that, a lot of times they can throw epithets at you, throw cuss words, and worse, they might start chucking rocks at you. So don't engage them, just ignore them. Well, I was watching these young boys play their soccer on their rock field. I mean, their field was nothing but a rock, big boulder. And the excuse for a soccer ball was, I mean, this thing had more patches on it. I mean, it was just threadbare. It was hardly able to hold air. But they were kicking around their soccer ball. We had 14 people in our team or group, and as we were walking in, there was a couple that was kind of elderly, and the one gentleman was a little bit infirm, and as he was trying to go down into the rock, he slipped and fell quite hard. And they were falling. They were quite a ways behind the main group. They were trying to take their time. We saw him fall, and we thought, oh no. We started going to help him. But guess who beat us to the fallen member? These boys had seen him fall and came through the fence and came around him to help him up and to make sure he was okay. And they were speaking in broken English. You okay? You okay? You fine? You fine? That's hate right there, man. That's obnoxious hate. These kids aren't taught to hate. The people that normally come there, look down their noses at them and hate them first. I'm standing about 6'7", right, and I was able to see what they were doing as we came back, and I started talking to the boys and asking them who their favorite soccer players were, and started to have a dialogue with them. You know what? Boy, the ice was broken. We weren't the enemy. We're their friends. And when you give them US dollars, enough to go buy a simple new soccer ball, we became their heroes. So don't believe what Donald Trump is spouting in that speech. Is absolutely false. And by the way, that $150 billion that he talks about us giving Iran, no, those were frozen Iranian assets in United States banks. In other words, it was Iranian government money that was wrongfully taken by our administration. To hear Trump tell it, it's money that was given from the U.S. Treasury. Oh, what a liar! What a false one! But let's go, folks. I promised you in the first hour. Let's talk about what I call Vote Scam 2016. Okay, guess what, folks? There's gatekeepers called ES&S. The let me just explain to you exactly what goes on. You're never going to hear talked about in mainstream media at all. But follow the dots, connect the dots. Who are these people that count the votes? Do you know how the process works? Who are the groups that control it? Well, let me tell you, folks, that there's three companies that officially count 98% of the United States vote, and they do it on secret, yes, secret computer programs. You see, the software of these programs is totally off limits to election officials and everyone else because they have binding contracts to election officials in each and every county of each and every state. These big three mega election vendor corporations are ES&S, company called HART, HARTN, company called Dominion. Dominion bought out Diebold in the year 2013. You see, they have absolute power to fix the election computer and thus the reports to Fox or to CNN or to MSNBC or NBC or ABC, CBS, the major media outlets, they feed them the election results, which they tabulate completely in secret with no oversight. I call them the Election Vote Scam Syndicate, the EVS. Now, Election System and Services, ESS. Let's look at who owns these companies. I've done the digging. Okay, I've done it. I've found not only who owns and controls them, but who funded them into power. The year 1980. ES&S was founded by two Russian Jews with Russian Jewish mob ties, Todd and Bob Urosevich. That's who founded ES&S. They were financed into being by the rabid Zionist Jewish Amundsen family. The Amundsen family are billionaires. They made them in the insurance and saving and loans field. Remember the saving and loan scandals of the 80s? Well, yeah. The Amundsens made billions in those scandals. Bob Urosevich was the CEO of Diebold Election Systems, but see, Diebold was in a hard way after the HBO special documentary Vote Scam clearly documented how Diebold election systems were easily hacked by anybody that knew anything about hacking could make the results skewed ever the way they wanted. Diebold had a black eye over this, so you see, Bob Urosevich had a credibility problem. But what about who are the Urosevich brothers? Who were they? Look at their history. Bob Urosevich was CEO of a number of companies which were entangled in bribery prosecutions. Bribery, yeah, a bribery. In fact, the vice president of ES&S, this is something that, again, the news media is not going to ever talk about, was actually arrested and charged with bribery regarding selling results in voting machines. But guess what? At the highest level, which means the U.S. president, he took an immunity plea and never was prosecuted. Shazam. Yeah, that's right, folks. Oh, the brothers Yurcevich were all funded and backed by the Amundsen family in the year 1984. Brothers William and Robert Amundsen had unlimited capital to run and to secure contracts with county and state precincts, and they did. You've ever heard of AIS, American Information Systems? You see, that's Amundsen. Now, who are the Amundsens? Look at their family. I pulled their genealogy, folks. Dutch Jews, very, very prominent in the slave trade in America, financed the slave trade into the production of sugar cane and cotton in the Caribbean and islands and into the Americas. That's the Amundsen family. Very much a part of that unsavory group of Jews who did that. That's slavery, folks. They're slave traders. But you say, oh, wait a minute. They're good. They're just because they're Jewish doesn't mean they're bad. They're philanthropic. They've donated Amundsen Hall. They're funding public programming, PBS. They're for arts. They spend all this money providing facilities in most major cities for the performing arts, conferences, symposiums, and special events. Yeah, that's the Amundsens. But they control the votes. The Amundsens are very much friendly with Bibi Netanyahu and other officials of the Jewish mafia residing in Tel Aviv. The company website, just check out. They have a company website, ES&S, Elections, Selections, and Surveys. I quote from their website. For more than 3 decades, ES&S has had a successful track record of producing quality results. You could add to that to the highest bidder. Quote, we support thousands of elections every year and are proven experts you can rely on every day. In fact, in 2016, ES&S will support over 6,500 election events throughout the United States of America. Now, here's the reality, folks. I want you to take notes of this. I'm going to give you top 20 serious facts about this, and I've been able to dig up over the years. Listen, fully 80% of all votes in America are counted by only 2 companies, ES&S and Dominion. How is that? How is it that that it's not questioned at all by anybody that has a lick of sense? Fact number 2, there is no federal oversight. There is no federal agency. There is none. There is no federal agency with regulatory authority or oversight of the U.S. voting machine industry, specifically ES&S and Dominion. Fact number 3, the vice president of Dominion and the president of ES&S are brothers. Back in, you remember the Bush, this was documented when the Bush vote scandal in Ohio was documented by vote fraud. In 2004, back then the chairman and CEO of Diebold was just happened to be one of the major Bush campaign organizers and donors. He actually wrote publicly in 2003 that he was, and I quote, committed to helping Ohio deliver its electoral votes to the president next year. And that's exactly what happened. Vote Scam documented that so very well. Folks, don't have time on this show, but I challenge you to just to Google in Vote Scam HBO and watch that documentary. You can see it online. Watch it again. If you haven't seen it already, see it. Understand the problem that I'm talking about here. Did you realize that Republican Senator Chuck Hagel used to be the chairman of ES&S? But you know what? Shazam, he became senator based on votes counted by his own company, ES&S Machines. Is that a conflict of interest? Do you think? The same Republican Senator Chuck Hagel, long connected to the Bush crime family cartel, was indeed caught in perjury, lying about his ownership of ES&S by an inquiry in the Senate Ethics Committee. Did you realize that point number 7, Senator Chuck Hagel was on a short list of George W. Bush's vice presidential candidates? Yeah. By itself, ES&S is the single largest voting machine manufacturer in the U.S., and its computers count for over 65% of all U.S. votes. So you see, you don't really need to fix everybody. You just need to fix ES&S. And here's the reality, folks. ES&S, and Dominion's voting machines are touch screens. Now, I don't know where you voted if you're listening to this, or even if you did vote, but you walk into the little booth and there's a touch screen computer. And here's the reality: there is no paper trail of any votes. You have to you have to have a leap of faith. I'm gonna touch the screen. Where's the paper trail? How can you have a recount? It's not, you really can't have a recount. There's no such thing. They're counted once. Let me be very clear for those of you that may not get what I'm saying. With no paper trail, there was no way to verify that the data coming out of the machine and going to the central computer bank of that state or that county is the same as what was legitimately put into that. That's by design, folks. And you don't think there's a problem here? Before it was bought out by Dominion, Diebold was, of course, also made out most of the ATM teller machines, checkout scanners, ticket machines. Isn't it interesting that the Diebold still manufactures, even though they've been purchased, they manufacture these other machines as long as with ES&S's machine, they manufacture it. Here's the point. The ATMs, the checkout scanners, and the ticket machines, all made by Diebold, they log each transaction and each of them generate a paper trail. What kind of machine would it be if you go to a Diebold ATM at your local Costco and you punch it in and get $500 out and there's no paper trail showing you got that money. It's going into your bank account. It's ridiculous. You would have that, but yet there's no paper trail generated by voting machines. It's illogical. It's crazy. Diebold just happens to be based in Ohio, a place where it was clearly shown that George W. Bush flipped the election from Al Gore. Just coincidence. That was left out of the vote scam documentary, by the way. Guess who wrote this? When I found this out, I was shocked, really. The consultants that Diebold employs, now ES&S employs, who actually wrote the central compiler computer code that counts the votes in 30 of our 50 states. These consultants and developers that wrote this are all 5 convicted felons. And you should see what they're convicted on, folks. Bribery and fraud. White-collar crimes, folks. Convicted felons. They're the ones writing the programs for these machines. And who was their boss of bosses? Who owns their company? Yeah, Russian mafia Jews, ladies and gentlemen. And you don't tell me there's a problem. There's not a problem in this country. Check out Jeff Dean. Jeff Dean, Senior Vice President of Global Election Systems. Senior Vice President of GES, Global Election Systems. Even though he was convicted of 23 counts, not 1, not 2, not 3, not 4, 23 counts of felony theft in the first degree, Jeff Dean was retained as the top consultant by Diebold, and he himself is the one largely responsible for programming the scanning software used in the voting machines now used in most of the United States. These are the gatekeepers, folks, that bring you the election results that you sit there and listen for at 11 o'clock at night on Tuesday night. There's a website called blackboxvoting.org. Even msnbc.msn.com own website. Do you realize that California has banned the use of Diebold machines, ES&S machinery? They're the one state that's banned the use of Diebold machines because they knew the security was so bad with them. Diebold made these claims on the movie Vote Scam, completely saying it can't be hacked, it's hack proof. But in fact, there's a movie, blackboxvoting.com. A trained chimpanzee was able to hack into it. A chimp could do it. Oh, yeah. Oh, folks, I kid you not. Then there's always the Florida. See, you have to understand that one of the hot spots headquarters for these mobsters that control this, the organized crime syndicate that control this and control Israel, are centered in Florida, ladies and gentlemen. If you watch the returns like I did and saw what happened, when Florida, by a slim 2 percentage points, was declared for Trump, it was basically all over but the singing. That's when the air went out of Hillary's camp. The die was cast. You see, the inside straight was trumped. Her so-called blue wall was crumbling, and she knew it. See, it's kind of funny, really. You got 2 syndicate-loving lackeys, 2 syndicates that are controlling each of the candidates, and just one candidate had more rigging ability than the other. You see, and the key thing, as I've showed in the first hour, is who is more supportive in every way to this criminal cartel called Israel. I've studied enough to know what happened in Israel in the 1960s. I've interviewed and had on this show survivors of the USS Liberty. Again, on this Veterans Day, I salute them if they are listening. I still get emails occasionally for some of them. I very rarely get choked up interviewing a guest, but I did when I interviewed the USS Liberty survivors, two of them. Their heartfelt testimony and their description of watching their mates, their friends machine gunned in the water, strafed by jets sporting the Star of David. I got choked up. I still do to this day thinking about it. Because not so much because of the tragedy itself, but because what happened to these men afterwards, that they were silenced and muzzled for daring to talk and tell their story. Why? Who controls the media? Who controls the big five? Goldman Sachs / Rothschild, Rockefeller folks. It's the same. That's who it is. That's why you'll never hear the truth talked about. People ask me all the time, did you go vote, Dr. Ott? Nope, I did not. Why? You're not being American? I says, listen, do you really want to know why I'm not going to go into a booth and pull a lever or touch a screen? If you really want to know, I'll tell you. I will not be a party to this scam and it's just ridiculous. It doesn't matter. It's set. It is rigged. Donald Trump was telling the truth, but he didn't tell you the rest of the story. Who rigs it and why? He knew he was going to win. You'd heard him talk to the AIPAC committee. He knew he was going to be president. He knew the fix was in. It's all just it's a showmanship. He's an actor, folks. He's a gamesman. A very dangerous one. Like I said, Wednesday, 2 days ago, his first official press conference, he made it clear he was going to recognize Jerusalem as the capital of Israel. And he made the same promise to AIPAC, didn't he? He said he made a campaign promise or two, and this was his primary promise. In other words, it's what made him assured of the victory by the corrupt forces that control the voting process. And if you can't see it, you're blind. If you won't see it, you're corrupt. Sorry if I offend anybody in this, but this is the hardcore reality. We don't live in a free, unopen America. We live in a oligarchy controlled by mob rule. There are people out there saying Trump is not my president. Well, there is no president. It's a puppet controlled by these very evil men and women. Folks, Greater Israel is their goal. Jerusalem being the city cursed by Jesus of Nazareth. He sat on the Mount of Olives, I remind you, Scripture tells us. He sat on the Mount of Olives and gazed over the city, and he wept. He wept, and he says, "O Jerusalem, thou that stonest the prophets, how often I would have gathered you as a hen gathers their chicks, but ye would not." And he wept. Why? Because he said these words, "Behold, your house is left unto you desolate." He cursed Jerusalem. Jerusalem now is the epicenter of the synagogue of Satan and their powerful man at the top, Donald Trump. If you refuse to see that, if you're so blinded by his chicanery and his promises, his buffoonery, it's all an act, folks. Listen to that speech at AIPAC again. There is no buffoonery there. There is no faux pas, foot in the mouth statements. No, he's straight to the point. He is powerful and emotional speaker, a la Adolf Hitler, and he surely got the response that he needed. The Jerusalem Post reported on this speech that they were shocked and amazed, but very much he was a grand slam, and they would support him 1,000%. He was their candidate. I saw that review by the Jerusalem Post and others. It's the fix is in. It's done. I said that then. I says, no, Hillary doesn't stand a chance. She's underestimated. She did. She says. She said in her comments to her campaign workers, we underestimated Trump. No, you didn't underestimate Donald Trump. You underestimated the Jews that are behind him. I still think the exit polling was somewhat legitimate when 61% of the voters surveyed, according to the exit poll, said they definitely feared a Trump presidency. He was unfit to be president. That's about right, folks. Heaven help us. Put your faith in the one mighty and strong, ladies and gentlemen, and that's not Donald Trump. Turn it open.